series of presidents there giving their first address to Congress. President Biden will do that on Wednesday this week. Let's talk about it on our roundtable with Chris Christie, former Republican governor of New Jersey, Heidi Heitkamp, former Democratic senator from North Dakota, Republican strategist Sarah Fagan, and Angela Rye, host of On One and former executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus. Let's start out talking about President Biden. He'll be giving that speech on the eve of his 100-day. And Chris, I want to put up a poll, our new poll out this morning, that shows where he stands coming into the 100-day mark. 52% approval, about 10 points better than President Trump, but below every other former president in the modern era, basically. What does that tell you?
I think it's reflective of two things. I think first, it's just a very, very divided country. It has been for a long time.
So presidents have ceilings now, don't they?
I don't know if they do, but I think they do when they act in concert with the divided times. And President Biden's problem in his first 100 days is he spoke, and we all sat here and listened to him on Inauguration Day talking about bringing people together and doing all that, and he has governed as a far-left president. Every policy proposal he's put forward has been to appease the far left of his party. And in fact, he's really become a part of the far left of his party.
What he's done on COVID is broadly popular, though, according to that poll, more than 60% approval.
Given the fact that he has shown compassion regarding COVID, which President Trump did not do, and given that vaccines have now been going out at a very rapid pace, which is as much his benefit of the timing of his entry into office as it is about what his administration has really done, of course he's going to do well on COVID. But the bigger issue, George, is I really believe by this fall, COVID will be a less important issue to the country, and they're going to be looking at all the proposals he's put forward, and that's going to be, that's why you see that 52%.
Heidi Heitkamp, I want to bring this to you because the poll does show that this is something of a vulnerability to the president on bipartisanship.
Well, clearly, but you got to remember that there's bipartisanship and then there's unifying the country around an agenda. His COVID relief package, incredibly important and very successful even in a state like North Dakota. I think President Biden's problem is that he's playing in Washington, D.C. as opposed to getting out into the country, starting to talk to normal people, regular people, people in my state, your state, about what he intends to do. And I think he can bring a coalition, a bipartisan uniting coalition around his agenda, but he can't do it from Washington, D.C. That place is toxic. They don't want to make a deal. They don't want to get things done because it's all about power politics. I think he's on the right track with the right agenda. The question is, how does he sell that agenda?
Sarah.
It's too big, it's too bold, it's too far left, as Chris said. I mean, at every stage of the spending debate, which of course COVID relief package was a huge package, now to come back with over $2 trillion of spending masked as infrastructure. There are some really good proposals in there that he can get bipartisan support on in an infrastructure bill, roads, bridges, ports. But so much of it is social spending, and social spending that is not a one-time deal. It is another entitlement. And so when you look at that and how to pay for it, and look, we can debate whether corporate taxes should be 28 or 29% or 32, and individual taxes going up. But when you look at almost doubling the capital gains tax, you're talking about half the investment going into small businesses, and that is going to have a long-term, very devastating impact.
Angela Rye, so far at least, huge approval for the president among Democrats, about 90%.
Here's the thing. I think it's so rich to hear folks talking about Joe Biden's far-left agenda. If it is far-left to sign 60 executive orders overturning the hatred that was in Donald Trump's executive orders, at least 23 of them, if it is far-left to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord, if it's far-left to end the Muslim travel ban, if it is far-left to restore the partnership with the World Health Organization, then I think most of the country is far left. These are things that are common sense to do. When you talk about infrastructure, yes, there are some social things that need to happen in infrastructure because it just so happens that discrimination and inequitable conditions exist even in our infrastructure. That is not something that was originated in this administration. Actually, Transportation Secretary Anthony Foxx talked about the division just in the roads in his own community. So it is incumbent upon this president and his administration to undo all of the hatred from the last
So,
one.
Chris, address that point. It does seem that the specific proposals the president is making are broadly popular.
George, they're not. Look, we could set up straw men and say, well, he overturned this executive order, next, but that's not what we were talking about this morning. What Sarah just talked about, the capital gains issue is nothing more than income redistribution. It's socialism. Joe Biden's proposal to do that. Let's remember that investment income, they've already paid taxes on it. You paid taxes on it before you invested it. And now you're going to pay taxes on it again at the same rate that you pay.
But a difference in the rate, it changes the capital gains tax into socialism?
Sure, of course it does. It's redistribution of income, George. And I just want to warn everybody out there, wait until you see what happens to your retirement funds. If Joe Biden gets a 39.6% capital gains, wait till you see what happens to the market. And as most people in America who have their IRAs and their 401ks and self-directed retirement invested in the stock market, they're going to see their retirement income and their college savings income and 529s drop significantly.
It's so
That's going to be the problem.
It's so interesting to hear this allegation of socialism. I know these are buzzwords that work very well with the Republican Party, so congratulations for using them this morning. But I think what is so interesting is we have people in the middle of a pandemic that you said wouldn't matter by the time we get to the fall. And on the left, there's a conversation happening about student loan debt. How much should be forgiven, $50,000 versus $10,000? And we're talking about a capital gains increase when you all just had basically the reparations that my community's been asking for in your last tax proposal. So I don't even understand what we're talking about here as it relates to
I just want to say, first off, let's correct this idea you already paid on your capital gains. You paid on the initial investment, which then you only pay on the actual gains from the initial investment. So let's not say you already paid taxes on it. You're actually earning income. You're actually getting dividends, or you're getting interest, or when you sell it, you make money. And this is one of the biggest scams in the history of forever on income redistribution. If you have a tax, if you have a stock, you can pass it on to your kids with stepped-up basis, and it's never taxed. You know that there needs to be reform in unearned income. And so to demonize it and say it's going to hurt the little guy, that just is not factual, Chris. And
there's proposals to undo a lot of the inheritance tax benefits as well. But look, this is really a matter of how do you want to help Americans. And there's been so much investment in diversity and inclusion and ESG and climate change companies. And what Joe Biden has proposed factually will take half of that money and, as Chris said, redistribute it in another form in social programs that to date, in many cases, have not proven to be the most effective way to help lift people up. And so, look, politically speaking, most people in Washington, it's early, think that Republicans will regain the House. Joe Biden has roughly 11 months, maybe up till next March, to get an agenda passed. And, you know, he has gone out with such large packages that he risks not having big accomplishments beyond COVID.
Is police reform, Chris, let's talk about that. There did seem to be at the beginning of the week, after the Chauvin verdict, an acceleration of calls for bipartisan reform in the House and the Senate. Tim Scott has been suggesting he thinks something can get done. Are you optimistic?
I do think that it can get done, and I think if they work with folks like Tim Scott and others in the Senate, they'll get something done. And it should be done, and this is where the president could be leading. And that's where that number will go up from 52% to a higher number. If the American people actually see him saying, okay, I'll work with some Republicans in the Senate who are willing to do it, they could do the same thing on infrastructure. And there are plenty of Republicans who will vote for a large, historically large infrastructure bill to get that done because they want to invest in America's infrastructure and they're willing to pay for it. But if you continue to go the other ways, and we talk about buzzwords like socialism, and Heidi gives the kind of the Senate speak on you're not paying taxes twice, even when you are paying taxes twice. Those people are paying taxes twice. They pay taxes on their money when they invest in it.
I want to go back to
Chris,
police reform.
You know it. They pay on the gains gain, not on the initial investment.
Angela, it does seem like this issue I talked about with both Congresswoman Bass and Senator Scott, this issue of how much to shield police from lawsuits, what the standard should be for prosecution, that is going to be what determines whether we get a compromise or not.
It does, and I think what we have to look at is this verdict this week. With Derek Chauvin, this wasn't his first incident. It wasn't even his fifth. And we like to talk about bad apples a lot, but the issue is that the way the system of policing is currently set up, it doesn't punish bad systems or bad apples. Derek Chauvin, before George Floyd's 9 minutes and 29 seconds, knelt on the back of a 14-year-old black boy for 17 minutes in 2017. In North Carolina, just this week, you have Andrew Brown, the father of 7 children, Micaiah Bryant in Columbus, Ohio. You have Miles Jackson in Columbus, Ohio, who was shot in an emergency room. Andrew Hill dropping off Christmas presents, right? And the Columbus Police Department isn't about one bad apple. It's about an entire department. So we have to talk about qualified immunity without fighting with buzzwords, but really talking about how we solve for a system that by design from its inception was designed to capture and return enslaved people back to their masters. If we can't uproot what was intended, we will forever have this problem, and we have to be willing to have honest discourse.
Well, in the case of Derek Chauvin, the system worked because he's going to spend most of the rest of his life in jail, as he should. You know, but we run the risk of overreaction. You know, we need police reform in this country, and I think we can get it. And it's in many ways a layup for Joe Biden. Republican senators will not go against Tim Scott on this issue. So if the president can get a deal with Tim Scott, there will be a package. And
Sarah, if people thought the system worked, Chauvin wouldn't have been a police officer, and
my point is that
people would be alive. But my point is, this is a subject that has gone so far because of all the work that's been done. Tim Scott is a hero on this. If you ever want to hear an amazing group of floor speeches, and they so seldom mean anything, but Tim Scott did 3 floor speeches that I think helped educate the country of, as a conservative Republican senator, what he experienced from law enforcement intervention. And I think he truly can be a bridge on this issue if we lower temperatures and we start talking about how we can reform police systems, but also recognize that there's a lot of history here that needs to be
of course there does. There needs to be police reform. We all agree on that. At the same time, we can't have the White House at the podium every time there's an altercation, you know, say that it is systemic racism, because it is not. There are instances that are of systemic racism, and they need to be addressed. There are instances where a cop simply makes, in a split-second decision, a very terrible call. And there are instances when the cop makes the right call, and it's a tragic outcome. And, you know, right now, every single altercation is being presented as systemic racism, and that's just not accurate.
I don't think
so we need to dial it back and figure out how to do a better job in this country by teaching and educating police officers.
And isn't that a fair point, though? Like you mentioned several different instances, and again, in every single case it's tragic because a life was lost, but they were very different cases.
Well, we're talking about, for example, with the Columbus Police Department, 30 black people killed in the last 5 years. Systemic racism isn't something that you get to cherry pick and decide when you want to apply it. It means the system at its core is rotten. It means that it has to be reimagined and revisited, as Karen Bass talked about earlier in the show, who also is a champion and a hero on this issue, having the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act pass the House twice. What is incumbent upon, I think, especially people who are perpetuators of said system, is to understand that it's not just my experience. It's not just me being emotional. There is literally trauma that I carry in my body. I encourage you all to read a book called My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem, who talks about how we carry trauma in our bodies. White body supremacy, black body trauma, and police body trauma. It is not fair for us to allow for police officers to shoot and kill because they have an irrational fear of a black person or a person of color. That's something that has to be addressed at the systemic level.
Listen, I think that the only way we're going to get these things solved is to bring the emotion and the rhetoric down on both sides. And I think Tim did a very good job of that in terms of talking very honestly and directly about these issues. And if what we're going to do is have high emotion on both sides of this, we're not going to come to a resolution. Listen,
and emotion is there. That's
of course, but George, but the job of leaders is to control that emotion and to channel that emotion in a productive way. And that's what leaders on both sides of the aisle are going to have to do with this. We did this in New Jersey when we did prison reform and sentencing reform in New Jersey that lowered our prison population by 50%. During the time that I was governor. And people thought that couldn't get done. But what we did was we talked about the facts. And we laid the facts out with no emotion, but with controlled emotion on both sides so that people would come to the right result. That's the right result for civil justice and social justice in my state, and it's the right way to do police reform.
We will see what both President Biden and Tim Scott say about that on Wednesday. Thank you all very much. We'll be right back with Dr. Anthony Fauci.